Right now, as you are watching this, a massive wall of warm water stretching over 6,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean is rising toward the surface. And when it breaks through, it will reshape the weather for every single state in America for the next 18 months. This is not a drill. This is not clickbait. The data coming out of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the European weather models in the last 72 hours has stunned even veteran meteorologists. We are potentially looking at one of the strongest El Nino events in recorded history. And I'm going to show you exactly what that means for your city, your family, and your safety, starting right now. But first, let me make you a promise. By the 5-minute mark of this video, you will know the exact timeline of when severe weather hits your region, which months carry the highest risk, and what the historical data tells us about how bad this could get. And stay with me to the end because I am going to walk through a detailed forecast for over 270 cities and locations across the United States. If you live in America, your city is on this list, so do not go anywhere. Now, here is the question that should keep you up tonight. What happens when the Pacific Ocean heats up by nearly 3 degrees Celsius above normal? To put that in perspective, the last time we saw numbers even close to that was the infamous 1997-1998 El Nino, and that event caused over $35 billion in damage worldwide and was linked to an estimated 23,000 deaths across the globe. And the models right now are suggesting this developing El Nino could match or even exceed those numbers. Let me show you what is happening beneath the ocean surface because this is where the story gets absolutely wild. Picture the Pacific Ocean, the largest body of water on Earth, stretching from the Americas all the way to Australia. Right now, on the surface, we are technically still in a La Nina pattern. The surface waters near the equator are slightly cooler than normal. That is the last gasp of La Nina hanging on by a thread. But here's the twist that changes everything. Underneath that cool surface layer, there is a massive pool of abnormally warm water building up. We are talking about water temperatures running 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal, lurking just below the surface across thousands of miles of ocean. Think of it like a pot of water on a stove. The surface might look calm right now, but underneath, the heat is building and building and building. And when that warm water finally pushes up to the surface, it is going to be like flipping a switch on the global weather pattern. Now, I know what you are thinking. How soon? When does this switch flip? And that brings us to the timeline that every American needs to understand. The Climate Prediction Center has just released updated probabilities, and here is what they show. By June, July, and August of this year, there is a 60% chance we are in a full-blown El Nino. By October, November, and December, that probability jumps to 80%. And based on the European ensemble models, which are considered some of the most accurate long-range forecasting tools on the planet, this El Nino could peak sometime between late fall and early winter. But here is what makes this one potentially historic. Let me walk you through the 3 strongest El Nino events ever recorded. Number 1 on the list is 2015-2016, which peaked at 2.75 degrees Celsius above normal in the equatorial Pacific. Number 2 is the legendary 1997-1998 event at 2.4 degrees Celsius above normal. And number 3 is 1982-1983 at 2.23 degrees Celsius above normal. Now look at what the European ensemble members are showing for this developing El Nino. A significant number of those model runs are projecting temperatures above 2 degrees Celsius. Some are pushing toward 2.5. And here is the part that made my jaw drop. After every single model update in the past several weeks, the projections have been trending warmer and warmer and warmer. The trend is not slowing down, it is accelerating. So, what does this mean for you specifically? Let us break this down season by season, region by region, and I am going to get as specific as possible because you deserve real information, not vague generalities. Let us start with hurricane season because that is the most immediate concern. Hurricane season officially runs from June 1st through November 30th. And here is the good news first because I promised I would not just scare you. During a strong El Nino year, the Atlantic hurricane season is typically quieter than average. I want to emphasize that word, typically. Here is why. El Nino cranks up the wind shear across the Atlantic basin. Wind shear is basically wind blowing at different speeds or directions at different heights in the atmosphere. Hurricanes hate wind shear. It tears apart their structure, disrupts their circulation, and prevents them from organizing into powerful storms. El Nino also creates more atmospheric stability over the Atlantic, which is another thing that tropical storms absolutely despise. So if you are living along the Gulf Coast, the Atlantic seaboard, or anywhere in the Caribbean, the statistical odds favor a below-average hurricane season. The average Atlantic hurricane season produces about 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. During strong El Nino years, those numbers typically drop to around 9 or 10 named storms, 4 or 5 hurricanes, and 1 or 2 major hurricanes. And this is absolutely critical, do not let your guard down. I cannot stress this enough. Let me tell you about 1992. That was an El Nino year. The season was very quiet overall. But you know what happened that year? Hurricane Andrew. One of the most devastating hurricanes in American history. It made landfall in South Florida as a Category 5 monster with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour. It destroyed over 25,000 homes and caused $27.3 billion in damage in 1992 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that is over $55 billion today. And 2023, that was also an El Nino year. We had Hurricane Idalia make landfall as a major hurricane in the Florida Big Bend area. And the season produced 20 named storms, which was well above average despite the El Nino. So let me say it again. It only takes one. One storm making landfall in your area can change your life forever. So while the odds favor a quieter season, preparedness is not optional. Now let me tell you about the flip side, because while the Atlantic may be quieter, the Pacific hurricane season is expected to be significantly more active. The same conditions that suppress Atlantic hurricanes, the weakening trade winds, the warm water sloshing back across the equatorial Pacific, those conditions supercharge the Pacific hurricane season. This is particularly important for Hawaii, which we already saw get hammered this month with over 23 inches of rain in a single day on Maui. 23 inches. That is almost 2 feet of water falling from the sky in 24 hours. And do not skip ahead, because here comes the part I promised you at the beginning, the detailed regional breakdown. We are going to go through this systematically, and I want you to comment below with your city so I can prioritize your area in the next update video. Let us start with the Southeast United States. This is the region that is going to see some of the most dramatic weather changes during this El Nino. Florida, all of Florida, from Miami to Jacksonville, from Tampa to Pensacola, from Orlando to Tallahassee. Here is your timeline. Starting in late summer around August and September, as the El Nino strengthens, you are going to see a shift in the jet stream pattern. The southern branch of the jet stream is going to become much more active, and it is going to set up right across the Gulf of Mexico, aimed directly at Florida. What does this mean? It means increased severe weather risk. We are talking about an uptick in thunderstorm activity, increased tornado risk, and heavy rainfall events. The severe weather window for Florida during a strong El Nino typically runs from October through March, with the peak risk period being November through February. For cities specifically, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, expect wetter than normal conditions from November through March, with above-average rainfall totals potentially running 20 to 40% above normal. Tampa, St. Petersburg, and the entire Tampa Bay area, same story but with an added twist. The jet stream pattern during El Nino years tends to focus energy right across the central Gulf, and Tampa sits in a particularly vulnerable spot for severe thunderstorm complexes moving onshore. Orlando, Daytona Beach, and the Central Florida corridor, you are looking at increased rainfall and a higher than normal risk of severe weather, including tornadoes from November through February. Jacksonville, Tallahassee, and the northern Florida panhandle, this area becomes ground zero for severe weather during El Nino winters. The clash of the active southern jet stream with cold air pushing down from the north creates a breeding ground for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, moving into Georgia, Atlanta, Savannah, Augusta, Columbus, and Macon. Here is what you need to know. The El Nino pattern typically brings wetter and warmer than normal conditions to Georgia during the winter months. Atlanta specifically tends to see above-average rainfall from December through March. The severe weather risk is elevated, particularly from January through March when the jet stream is at its most active. Average winter temperatures in Atlanta during strong El Nino years run about 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Savannah and coastal Georgia will see increased rainfall and should be on alert for coastal flooding events when heavy rains combine with onshore flow. The Carolinas. Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach. North and South Carolina are right in the crosshairs of the active southern jet stream during El Nino winters. The Carolinas typically see wetter and milder than normal conditions from December through March. Charlotte and the Piedmont region can expect above-average rainfall with occasional ice storm threats when cold air does manage to push south and undercut the moisture stream. Charleston and the South Carolina Lowcountry should prepare for above-average rainfall and increased coastal flooding risk. Raleigh and the Research Triangle area is in an interesting spot because during strong El Nino years, the rain-to-snow line can fluctuate wildly, meaning some storms could bring significant ice rather than snow. And right now, as we are recording this, we just watched a perfect example of the kind of chaotic weather that is becoming more common. A massive storm system just tore across the eastern United States. The District of Columbia metro area was at the center of a long stretch of the East Coast on high alert with winds threatening to exceed 75 miles per hour and potential tornado warnings. The storm impacted everything from South Carolina up through Maryland, delaying tens of thousands of travelers. And this is March. We are not even in the El Nino enhanced severe weather season yet. Let us move to the Gulf Coast states. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and coastal Texas, Mobile, Alabama, Biloxi and Gulfport, Mississippi, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette, Louisiana, Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi, and Brownsville, Texas. This entire Gulf Coast corridor is going to be one of the most impacted regions during this El Nino. The southern jet stream essentially becomes a fire hose of moisture aimed right at the Gulf states. Here is your timeline. The enhanced moisture begins arriving in earnest by October and November. It peaks from December through February, and it gradually tapers off through March and into April. For Houston specifically, strong El Nino winters have historically produced some of the wettest conditions the city experiences. Winter rainfall can run 50 to 70% above normal during the strongest El Nino events. And remember, Houston already has significant flooding challenges due to its flat terrain and extensive urbanization. If you live in a flood-prone area of Houston, this is the year to make sure your flood insurance is current and your drainage systems are clear. New Orleans and southern Louisiana, same story, but even more pronounced. The combination of above-average rainfall, an active jet stream, and the natural low-lying topography of the region creates an elevated flood risk that persists throughout the winter months. Now let us swing over to the area that might benefit the most from this El Nino, California. And I mean every part of California: Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, Fresno, Bakersfield, San Jose, Oakland, Long Beach, Riverside, Anaheim, Santa Barbara, Monterey, Palm Springs, Redding, Eureka, every single one of these cities. Here is the headline. El Nino winters are typically wet winters for California, and that is overwhelmingly good news for a state that has been battling drought conditions for years. The southern branch of the jet stream, which is supercharged during El Nino, aims storm after storm at California from roughly November through March. The peak precipitation period is typically December through February. For Southern California specifically, Los Angeles, San Diego, Riverside, Anaheim, Long Beach, and Santa Barbara, El Nino years have historically produced winter rainfall totals that are 150 to 200% of normal. During the 2015-2016 El Nino, downtown Los Angeles recorded over 14 inches of rain for the winter season compared to a normal of about 5.5 inches. Now here is something wild that is already happening. While we are talking about El Nino bringing winter rains to California months from now, Southern California just experienced a heat wave that shattered records. Long Beach, which normally sits in the upper 60s to low 70s in March, just hit 92 degrees Fahrenheit last week. That is more than 20 degrees above normal for mid-March. This kind of temperature swing is exactly the type of chaotic weather pattern that develops during these transitional phases between La Nina and El Nino. For Northern California and the Sierra Nevada, the news is even bigger. Sacramento, San Francisco, and the Bay Area will see above-average rainfall. But the real story is the Sierra snowpack. During strong El Nino years, the Sierra Nevada mountains can receive massive snowfall totals. We are talking about snowpack levels that can reach 150 to 200% of normal. This is enormous for California's water supply because Sierra snowpack provides roughly 30% of the state's water through spring and summer snowmelt. For the Central Valley, Fresno, Bakersfield, and the agricultural heartland of California, El Nino rains can be a double-edged sword. The moisture is desperately needed for agriculture and groundwater recharge, but intense rainfall events can also cause flooding in this flat, low-lying region. The tule fog that the Central Valley is famous for also tends to be more persistent during wet El Nino winters, creating dangerous driving conditions on Interstate 5 and Highway 99. Now, I promised you over 270 cities, so let us keep moving because we have a lot of ground to cover and the information I am about to share for the northern states might surprise you. The Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Tacoma, Eugene, Salem, Spokane, Boise, and Olympia. Here is a plot twist that catches a lot of people off guard. While California gets wetter during El Nino, the Pacific Northwest often gets drier and warmer than normal during the winter months. This happens because the jet stream shifts southward during El Nino, directing most of the storm energy into California and the southern tier of the country rather than into Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Seattle and Portland typically see below-average rainfall and above-average temperatures during strong El Nino winters. Average winter temperatures can run 3 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. For Spokane and Boise in the interior Northwest, conditions tend to be milder and drier than normal as well. Snowfall totals in the Cascades and Northern Rockies are often below average, which can have implications for summer water supply and wildfire risk the following year. The Southwest, Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, El Paso. The desert Southwest is another region that typically sees above average precipitation during El Nino winters. Phoenix and Tucson can see winter rainfall totals that are 20 to 50% above normal. For a desert city where every drop of rain matters, this is significant. The enhanced storm track also increases the risk of flash flooding in the slot canyons and washes throughout Arizona and New Mexico. Las Vegas, which averages only about 4 inches of rain per year, can see winter storms that dump significant moisture in short periods, leading to urban flash flooding. If you have ever seen video of the Las Vegas Strip flooding during a thunderstorm, you know exactly what I am talking about. Albuquerque and Santa Fe in New Mexico tend to see above-average winter precipitation with increased snowfall in the Sangre de Cristo and Sandia Mountains. This is great news for the Rio Grande watershed and for ski resorts in the region. El Paso, sitting right on the Texas and New Mexico border, is positioned to catch moisture from both the enhanced Gulf Stream and Pacific Storm Track, potentially seeing some of the most above-average winter rainfall in the region. Now here comes the section that over 100 million Americans have been waiting for, the Northeast. New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, District of Columbia, Baltimore, Hartford, Providence, Pittsburgh, Newark, Buffalo, Albany, Syracuse, Portland, Maine, Burlington, Vermont. If you are a snow lover in the Northeast, listen very carefully because this El Nino could be your dream winter. Here is why, and this is where it gets really interesting from a meteorological perspective. During El Nino winters, the southern branch of the jet stream becomes very active, as we have already discussed. But here is the key. When that active southern jet stream interacts with the northern jet stream, it creates what meteorologists call phasing. Think of it like the Ghostbusters crossing the streams. When both jet streams come together and interact, it creates these massive, powerful storm systems. And in the Northeast, those massive storm systems have a name. Nor'easters, El Nino winters, are historically some of the most prolific nor'easter producers. These storms can dump enormous amounts of snow on the Interstate 95 corridor from Washington, District of Columbia to Boston. We are talking about storms that produce 12, 18, even 24 plus inches of snow in a single event. Here is the timeline for the Northeast. The nor'easter season typically runs from November through March, with the peak risk period being December through February. During strong El Nino years, the frequency of significant nor'easters, defined as storms producing 6 or more inches of snow, can increase by 30 to 50% compared to normal years. New York City specifically has a fascinating history with El Nino winters. During the 1995-1996 season, which was an El Nino year, New York City recorded 75.6 inches of snow, nearly double its average of about 30 inches. The blizzard of '96 in January of that year dumped over 20 inches on Central Park in a single storm. Boston, which averages about 50 inches of snow per year, has seen El Nino winters produce totals exceeding 70 to 80 inches. Buffalo, which is already one of the snowiest major cities in America, can see enhanced lake effect snow when El Nino-generated storms interact with moisture from the Great Lakes. Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington District of Columbia are in the sweet spot for the heaviest snow during El Nino nor'easters. These cities sit right in the zone where the warm, moist air from the Gulf Stream collides with cold air pushing south from Canada, and the result can be paralyzing snowstorms. But here is a critical nuance, and do not miss this. While El Nino winters tend to produce more big storms in the Northeast, the overall winter temperature trend is actually warmer than normal. The average winter temperature during strong El Nino years runs about 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal across the Northeast. What this means is you get these dramatic boom or bust patterns, mild spells punctuated by intense storm events. The quiet periods between storms tend to be warmer and drier than normal, but when the storms hit, they hit hard. Pittsburgh and the western Pennsylvania region are in an interesting spot because they catch influence from both the Great Lakes and the Mid-Atlantic storm track. El Nino winters in Pittsburgh tend to be milder overall with less total snowfall than normal, but with an increased risk of significant individual storm events. The Midwest: Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Columbus, Kansas City, St. Louis, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Des Moines, Omaha. The Midwest is one of the most complex regions to forecast during El Nino because the effects vary significantly from north to south. The northern tier of the Midwest, which includes Minneapolis, Milwaukee, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, typically sees warmer and drier than normal conditions during El Nino winters. This might sound great, but it has some downsides. Less snow cover means the ground can freeze deeper, which can impact agriculture in the spring. And warmer winter temperatures can lead to midwinter thaw events that cause ice jam flooding on rivers. We just saw a perfect example of extreme weather in this region. Parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan were buried under nearly 2 feet of snow over this past weekend. And while that specific storm was not directly caused by El Nino, it illustrates the kind of powerful weather systems that can impact the Midwest. During El Nino, these events become more focused on the southern and central parts of the region. Chicago is a fascinating case study during El Nino. The city tends to see milder than normal winter temperatures with an increased risk of rain events rather than snow during the November through January period. We literally just saw this play out when parts of northern Illinois were under a blizzard warning while thunderstorms simultaneously flooded Chicago streets. That kind of rain versus snow battle becomes more common during El Nino winters. Average winter temperatures in Chicago during strong El Nino years run about 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. St. Louis and Kansas City sit near the transition zone between the wetter conditions to the south and the drier conditions to the north. These cities can go either way, but the trend during strong El Nino events favors wetter than normal conditions with an increased severe weather risk, particularly from January through March. Indianapolis, Columbus, and Cincinnati are positioned to catch both rain and snow events depending on the storm track. El Nino winters in the Ohio Valley tend to be warmer and wetter than normal, with a higher than average number of ice storm events when warm air overrides cold surface air. The Northern Plains and Mountain West: Denver, Salt Lake City, Billings, Rapid City, Fargo, Sioux Falls, Cheyenne, Missoula, Great Falls, Helena, Casper. Denver is one of those cities where El Nino effects can be dramatic. The mile-high city tends to see above-average snowfall during El Nino winters, particularly from late fall through early spring. The enhanced storm track can bring powerful upslope events to the Front Range, producing significant snowfall totals. During the 2015-2016 El Nino, Denver recorded above-average snowfall with several significant storm events. Salt Lake City and the Wasatch Mountains are another region that typically benefits from El Nino. The enhanced Pacific storm track can deliver above-average snowfall to Utah as ski resorts, which is fantastic news for the tourism industry and water supply. The greatest snow on Earth gets even greater during strong El Nino years. For the northern tier of the Mountain West, Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, El Nino tends to bring warmer and drier conditions. Fargo, Bismarck, Billings, and Great Falls typically see below-average snowfall and above-average temperatures. This can reduce heating costs but also impacts the snowmelt that feeds rivers and reservoirs in the spring. Now let me shift to something that is already affecting millions of Americans right now before the El Nino even arrives. Extreme weather chaos. Right now, today, March 2026, we just witnessed a chaotic weather system that disrupted life across more than half the country simultaneously. Blizzards, extreme winds, unexpected heat, and flooding rain all happening at the same time from the Northeast to the Hawaiian Islands. Let me paint you the picture of what just happened because it perfectly illustrates the kind of weather whiplash that is going to become even more common as this El Nino develops. Tens of thousands of travelers were stranded nationwide as a powerful storm system swept across the country. The District of Columbia metro area found itself at the center of an intense weather alert with winds threatening to exceed 75 miles per hour and tornado warnings issued from South Carolina to Maryland. At the same time, Transportation Security Administration agents who were missing paychecks during a partial government shutdown were calling out from work, creating an extra layer of chaos at airports that were already struggling with weather cancellations and delays. Meanwhile, more than 2,000 miles to the west, Maui was dealing with its own disaster. The National Weather Service reported that the Hawaiian island received more than 23 inches of rain on Saturday alone. 23 inches in one day. That is almost 2 feet of water falling from the sky. Significant flooding was reported across Maui, the Big Island, and Oahu, with major damage to roads including South Kihei Road. And then, as if Mother Nature wanted to demonstrate just how bizarre things have gotten, Southern California was experiencing summer in the middle of March. Long Beach hit 92 degrees Fahrenheit last Thursday, shattering the previous record for the date. Normal highs for Long Beach in mid-March are in the upper 60s to low 70s, so you have blizzards burying the upper Midwest, hurricane-force winds on the East Coast, historic flooding in Hawaii, and record-breaking heat in California all happening simultaneously. This is March, and the El Nino has not even started yet. Okay, let us continue with our city-by-city breakdown because I still have the Southern Plains, the Mid-Atlantic, and New England to cover in detail, plus the timing information I promised you. The Southern Plains and Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Little Rock, Amarillo, Lubbock, Wichita, Waco, Midland, Odessa. Texas is going to be ground zero for some of the most significant El Nino impacts in the country, and the story changes dramatically depending on where in Texas you are. For the southern half of Texas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Corpus Christi, and the Rio Grande Valley, the El Nino pattern is going to bring drought-busting rains. This is not a small deal. Much of central and southern Texas has been dealing with drought conditions, and strong El Nino winters have historically been the single best drought busters for this region. Winter rainfall can exceed 150% of normal in the wettest years. The severe weather risk for Texas during El Nino is also significantly elevated. The active southern jet stream combined with moisture from the Gulf of Mexico creates prime conditions for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. The enhanced severe weather season for Texas during El Nino typically runs from November through April, with the peak risk period being February through April. Dallas and Fort Worth sit in an interesting zone where the severe weather risk is elevated, but winter precipitation can swing between rain, ice, and snow depending on the position of the Arctic front. During strong El Nino years, Dallas tends to see fewer total ice and snow events than normal, but when they do occur, they tend to be more significant because the moisture content is higher. Oklahoma City and Tulsa are right in the heart of the severe weather corridor that gets supercharged during El Nino. The combination of enhanced Gulf moisture, the active jet stream, and frequent cold front passages creates an extended and more active severe weather season. Oklahoma City should be particularly alert from February through May during this El Nino year. Now the Mid-Atlantic in more detail. Washington District of Columbia, Baltimore, Richmond, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Wilmington, Delaware, Atlantic City, Trenton. I touched on the nor'easter potential earlier, but there is more to the Mid-Atlantic El Nino story. The region tends to see above-average winter precipitation with a higher than normal percentage falling as rain rather than snow in the southern portions of the region. Richmond and Virginia Beach tend to see more rain than snow during El Nino winters. But Washington, District of Columbia, and Baltimore are in that sweet spot where the precipitation type can shift from rain to snow depending on the exact storm track, and when it does snow, the amounts can be very impressive. The flooding risk for the Mid-Atlantic is also elevated during El Nino winters. Coastal flooding from nor'easters, river flooding from persistent rain events, and urban flooding from heavy downpours all become more likely. The Potomac and James rivers and their tributaries should be watched closely from December through March. New England in detail: Boston, Providence, Hartford, New Haven, Worcester, Springfield, Manchester, New Hampshire, Portland, Maine, Burlington, Vermont, Bangor, Concord. New England during an El Nino winter is a study in extremes. The region tends to see dramatic temperature swings, with mild periods suddenly interrupted by intense storm events. Boston, which I mentioned earlier, is positioned to see some of the most significant nor'easters during this pattern. The coastal flooding risk for New England is also elevated during El Nino winters. Nor'easters can produce storm surges that flood coastal communities from Connecticut to Maine. Cities like Providence, which sits at the head of Narragansett Bay, and Portland, Maine on Casco Bay are particularly vulnerable to storm surge flooding during intense nor'easters. Burlington, Vermont, and the northern New England interior are interesting because they tend to see warmer than normal temperatures during El Nino, which means more freezing rain and ice storm events rather than pure snow. For a region where winter driving is already challenging, ice storms are among the most dangerous weather hazards. And I know many of you are also wondering about the territories and Alaska, so let me cover those briefly. Alaska: Anchorage, Fairbanks, Juneau. El Nino typically brings warmer than normal winter temperatures to Alaska, particularly in the southern and southeastern portions of the state. Anchorage and Juneau can see winter temperatures running 4 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. This can lead to rain events at lower elevations during periods that normally see all snow, increasing the risk of avalanches in mountainous terrain. Hawaii: Honolulu, Hilo, Kailua, Kona, Kahului. As we just saw, Hawaii is already getting hammered by extreme rainfall. During El Nino, the Pacific storm track shifts in a way that can bring increased rainfall to Hawaii, particularly during the winter months. The Hawaiian Islands should expect above-average rainfall and an increased risk of flash flooding and landslides from October through March, and Puerto Rico and the United States Virgin Islands, San Juan, Ponce, Charlotte, Amalie, Christiansted. The Caribbean tends to see drier than normal conditions during El Nino, which is consistent with the suppressed Atlantic hurricane activity we discussed earlier. However, individual weather events can still produce significant rainfall and localized flooding. Now, here is the part about timing that I know you have been waiting for, and I'm going to break this down as specifically as the science allows. The El Nino development timeline works like this. Right now, in March and April, we are in the transition phase. La Nina is dying and El Nino conditions are beginning to build. Surface ocean temperatures in the equatorial Pacific are starting to warm. From May through July, this is the emergence phase. El Nino conditions are expected to officially establish, with ocean temperatures crossing the plus 0.5 degrees Celsius threshold that defines El Nino. This is when you start seeing the first atmospheric responses. From August through October, this is the strengthening phase. The El Nino is expected to rapidly intensify. This is when the jet stream patterns really start to shift and the effects become obvious in daily weather patterns. From November through February, this is the peak phase. This is when the El Nino is expected to reach its maximum intensity. This is when all the impacts I have described, the enhanced nor'easters, the California rains, the Texas drought busters, the severe weather outbreaks are at their strongest. From March through May of next year, this is the decay phase. The El Nino is expected to begin weakening, but the atmospheric effects often lag the oceanic changes by several weeks to months, meaning impacts continue even as the ocean temperatures start to cool. Now let me give you region-specific timing. Southeast Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Alabama, Mississippi. Severe weather risk begins ramping up in October and November. Peak severe weather season runs December through February. Risk tapers off in March and April. Hurricane season risk is somewhat reduced from June through November, but remain prepared. Gulf Coast, Louisiana, and Texas. Enhanced rainfall begins October and November. Peak wet season December through February. Severe weather season extends February through April. Flash flood risk elevated throughout. California. Enhanced storm activity begins November. Peak wet season December through February. Sierra snowpack builds most rapidly January through March. Fire season may be moderated by increased moisture. Pacific Northwest. Warmer and drier than normal conditions set in by November. Pattern persists through February. Normal precipitation patterns return by March and April. Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada. Enhanced winter rainfall, November through February. Flash flood risk elevated during storm events. Beneficial moisture for reservoirs and groundwater. Northeast. Nor'easter season, November through March. Peak nor'easter risk, December through February. Significant snow events, most likely January and February. Coastal flooding risk elevated during major storms. Midwest, warmer than normal conditions, November through February. Southern Midwest sees increased precipitation. Northern Midwest sees below average snowfall. Ice storm risk elevated in the Ohio Valley. Southern Plains, Texas, and Oklahoma. Enhanced precipitation October through March. Severe weather season February through April. Drought relief most significant December through February. Northern Plains and Mountain West. Warmer and drier in the north, November through February. Denver and the Front Range see enhanced snowfall. Utah ski country benefits from increased storms. Now here is what I need from you, and this is important. Comment below with your city and state. I am building a detailed series of follow-up videos with specific forecasts for as many cities as possible. The more specific your location, the better I can tailor the forecast. And if you are watching from an area I covered today, tell me, does the forecast match what you are already experiencing? Are you seeing unusual weather patterns? Your ground truth observations are incredibly valuable. Also, I want to address something that is probably on a lot of minds right now. What about coral reefs and marine life? During the 2015-2016 El Nino, we saw devastating coral bleaching events, particularly in the Florida Keys and across the Gulf of Mexico. When ocean temperatures rise above normal for extended periods, coral expels the symbiotic algae that gives it color and provides nutrition. If the heat stress persists too long, the coral dies. The 2015-2016 event was responsible for the worst global coral bleaching event ever recorded at that time, affecting over 70% of the world's coral reef systems. If this developing El Nino reaches the intensity that the models are suggesting, we could be looking at another significant coral bleaching event. This is particularly concerning for the Florida Keys, which have already been stressed by unusually warm ocean temperatures in recent years. In the summer of 2023, ocean temperatures near the Florida Keys reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is uncharted territory for a marine ecosystem that starts experiencing stress above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And there is another consequence of a strong El Nino that does not get enough attention. Its effect on global temperatures. El Nino acts like a release valve for heat stored in the Pacific Ocean. When all that warm water comes to the surface, it releases enormous amounts of heat energy into the atmosphere. This typically causes a spike in global average temperatures. The current record for the warmest year on record is being constantly challenged, and a strong El Nino in 2026 into 2027 could push global temperatures to new highs. But I want to bring this back to practical, actionable information for you. Here is what you can do right now to prepare, regardless of where you live. First, if you live in a flood-prone area anywhere in the country, check your flood insurance now. Standard homeowners insurance does not cover flood damage. You need a separate flood insurance policy, and there is typically a 30-day waiting period before a new policy takes effect. Do not wait until the rain is falling to find out you are not covered. Second, if you live in the Southeast, Gulf Coast, or Southern Plains, make sure your severe weather safety plan is up to date. Know where your nearest shelter is. Have a way to receive severe weather warnings, whether that is a weather radio, a smartphone app, or both. Practice your plan with your family. Third, if you live in the Northeast and you rely on snow plowing or snow removal services, book those contracts early this year. If the El Nino produces the kind of nor'easter season the models are suggesting, demand for snow removal is going to be through the roof. Fourth, if you live in California, make sure your property is prepared for heavy rainfall. Clean your gutters and downspouts. Make sure your sump pump is working if you have one. If you live near hillsides or slopes, be aware of mudslide and debris flow risk, especially in areas that have been affected by recent wildfires. Fifth, for everyone, regardless of location, build or refresh your emergency supply kit. Have at least 3 days of food, water, and medications on hand. Have flashlights, batteries, and a backup charging method for your phone. Have important documents in a waterproof container that you can grab quickly if you need to evacuate. Now, before I let you go, let me circle back to the big picture because what is happening right now in the Pacific Ocean is genuinely remarkable from a scientific standpoint. We are watching the planet's climate system do something it has done many times before, but potentially at a scale that exceeds anything in the modern instrumental record. The subsurface warmth building in the Pacific is extraordinary. The speed at which models are increasing their intensity forecasts is unusual, and the potential impacts on global weather patterns for the next 12 to 18 months are enormous. I am not telling you this to scare you. I am telling you this because knowledge is power, and being prepared is always better than being surprised. This El Nino is coming. The question is not if, but how strong, and the early indications suggest it could be historic. I will be tracking this every single day and bringing you updates as the situation develops. In my next video, I am going to dive even deeper into the winter forecast for 26 and 27 because if you think the spring and summer impacts are significant, wait until you see what the models are showing for next winter. I will also be breaking down individual state forecasts in much more detail based on your comments. But hold on, I still owe you more cities. I said over 270 and I meant it. Let me rapid fire through additional locations so nobody is left out. The Tennessee Valley and the interior South. Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Huntsville, Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, Shreveport, Monroe, Louisiana. This corridor running from the Mississippi Delta through Tennessee is going to see some of the most active weather in the country during this El Nino. Nashville in particular sits in a severe weather hot zone during El Nino winters. The city averages about 6 tornadoes per year within 50 miles, but during strong El Nino years, that number can increase by 20 to 40%. The enhanced southern jet stream channels moisture and instability right through the Tennessee Valley, and when cold fronts sweep through, the result is often lines of severe thunderstorms with embedded tornadoes. Memphis and the Mississippi Delta region will see above-average rainfall from November through March, with an elevated risk of river flooding along the Mississippi and its tributaries. Memphis should prepare for the Mississippi River to run above normal levels during late winter and spring. Knoxville and Chattanooga in the eastern Tennessee Valley will experience a mix of rain and occasional snow events, with above-average total precipitation. The Smoky Mountains could see enhanced snowfall at higher elevations. Birmingham and Huntsville, Alabama are positioned in the severe weather corridor and should be on heightened alert for tornado outbreaks from November through April. Historically, some of the most devastating tornado outbreaks in Alabama history have occurred during El Nino patterns. Let me pause here and share something important about tornado preparedness that everyone in the southeast and southern plains needs to hear. During El Nino years, the tornado season effectively starts earlier and runs longer than normal. In a typical year, tornado activity in the southeast ramps up in March and peaks in April. During El Nino, we see an earlier onset beginning in January and February, with significant tornado outbreaks possible as early as late November and December. This extended season catches people off guard because they are not expecting severe weather that early. The overnight tornado threat is also higher during El Nino winters. Some of the most deadly tornadoes in American history have struck at night when people are sleeping and less aware. If you live anywhere from Texas to the Carolinas, I strongly recommend investing in a weather radio that can wake you up with alerts during the night. Your smartphone may not wake you up reliably, but a dedicated weather radio with an alarm function will. This is a $20 to $40 investment that could save your life. Also critical is understanding the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning. A tornado watch means conditions are favorable for tornadoes to develop. A tornado warning means a tornado has been detected by radar or spotted by trained observers and you need to take shelter immediately. During El Nino-enhanced severe weather outbreaks, you may see tornado watches issued covering large areas for 12 or more hours at a time. Do not ignore these. Have your shelter plan ready and be prepared to execute it quickly if a warning is issued. The Midsouth and Arkansas. Little Rock, Fort Smith, Jonesboro, Pine Bluff, Texarkana, Hot Springs. Arkansas is another state that falls squarely in the enhanced precipitation zone during El Nino. Little Rock typically sees winter rainfall totals running 20 to 40% above normal. The state also experiences an uptick in severe weather, particularly from February through April. The combination of enhanced moisture and the active jet stream makes Arkansas a prime target for supercell thunderstorms and tornadoes during the spring transition months. The Arkansas River and its tributaries will need to be monitored closely for flooding as winter rainfall accumulates. Kentucky and West Virginia. Louisville, Lexington, Frankfort, Bowling Green, Charleston, West Virginia, Huntington, Morgantown. Kentucky and West Virginia are in the zone where warm and cold air masses battle most intensely during El Nino winters. Louisville tends to see above-average winter temperatures with an increased ratio of rain to snow events. However, when cold air does push south and undercut the moisture stream, the result is often freezing rain and ice storms. Ice storms are arguably the most dangerous winter weather hazard in this region because they take down power lines, make roads impassable, and can leave communities without electricity for days or even weeks. Lexington and central Kentucky face similar risks. The Bluegrass region is particularly vulnerable to ice storms during El Nino winters because it sits right in the transition zone between warm rain and frozen precipitation. Charleston and Morgantown, West Virginia are positioned to see a mix of rain, snow, and ice events, with above-average total precipitation throughout the winter. Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley. Charlottesville, Roanoke, Lynchburg, Winchester, Staunton, Harrisonburg, Blacksburg, Fredericksburg, Manassas. Virginia is one of those states where the El Nino forecast varies dramatically over a relatively short distance. The coastal plain and tidewater region around Norfolk and Virginia Beach will see predominantly rain events with above-average winter precipitation. Move inland to the Piedmont around Charlottesville and Lynchburg, and you start to see a higher percentage of winter precipitation falling as snow and ice. Get into the Shenandoah Valley and the Blue Ridge Mountains around Roanoke, Winchester, and Staunton, and the snowfall potential increases significantly during El Nino nor'easters. The Shenandoah Valley has a fascinating meteorological characteristic called cold air damming, where cold air gets trapped between the Blue Ridge and Allegheny Mountains. During El Nino nor'easters, this trapped cold air can turn what would be a rain event into a major ice storm or heavy snow event. Blacksburg and the New River Valley in southwest Virginia face similar dynamics. This region should be prepared for an active and potentially impactful winter. Let me also give you more detail on the Great Lakes region because the interaction between El Nino and the Great Lakes creates some unique weather patterns that millions of Americans need to understand. The Great Lakes. Cleveland, Detroit, Toledo, Erie, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, Green Bay, Duluth, Rochester, New York, Syracuse, Watertown, New York. The Great Lakes themselves act as a massive heat reservoir. In a normal winter, cold air sweeping across the relatively warm lake waters generates lake-effect snow that buries cities downwind of the lakes. During an El Nino winter, the dynamics shift. Because temperatures tend to run above normal, the lakes stay ice-free longer. This can actually increase lake-effect snow events early in the season before eventually reducing them as the warmer pattern takes hold. Buffalo and Rochester, New York, both famous for lake-effect snow off Lake Erie and Lake Ontario respectively, may see a different character to their winter precipitation during this El Nino. Expect less persistent, low-level lake effect events, but an increased risk of significant nor'easter snowstorms that impact the entire region at once. Cleveland and Erie are positioned downwind of Lake Erie and will see a similar pattern shift. Detroit and Grand Rapids, Michigan are downwind of Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, respectively. El Nino winters in Michigan tend to be warmer with below-average snowfall, but the Great Lakes influence means that any cold air outbreak can still produce locally significant snowfall amounts. Traverse City and the northern lower peninsula of Michigan should expect a milder than normal winter overall, which can impact the tourism economy that depends on consistent snow cover for skiing, snowmobiling, and ice fishing. Green Bay and the eastern shore of Wisconsin will see a pattern similar to Michigan, with warmer temperatures and generally below-average snowfall. Duluth at the western tip of Lake Superior tends to see warmer winters during El Nino, with lake effect snow events becoming less frequent as the season progresses. Syracuse and Watertown in upstate New York are two of the snowiest cities in America. During El Nino, they may see a shift from persistent lake effect events to fewer but potentially more intense synoptic storm events. Now let me add some critical cities I have not covered yet in the western states, the Mountain West in more detail. Reno, Bozeman, Jackson, Wyoming, Aspen, Steamboat Springs, Park City, Flagstaff, Durango, Taos, Bend, Oregon. For the ski country communities, this El Nino could be a game changer. Park City and the Wasatch Range in Utah typically see enhanced snowfall during El Nino, and some of the best ski seasons on record have coincided with strong El Nino events. Aspen and Steamboat Springs in Colorado benefit from the enhanced Pacific moisture stream, with snowfall totals that can run above average, particularly from December through March. Jackson, Wyoming is in a transition zone. The northern part of the state tends to see drier El Nino conditions, but the Teton Range is positioned to catch moisture from the enhanced storm track, making for potentially excellent skiing. Flagstaff, Arizona at 7,000 feet elevation is positioned to receive above-average snowfall during El Nino, consistent with the enhanced precipitation across the southwest. The Arizona Snow Bowl ski area has seen some of its best seasons during strong El Nino years. Bend, Oregon is an interesting case because while most of the Pacific Northwest trends drier during El Nino, the Cascade Range can still receive significant snowfall from moisture that does make it into the region. And the cities I know many of you are waiting for, the major metropolitan areas in the middle of the country that I want to give additional detail on, Minneapolis and St. Paul in depth. The Twin Cities are in the warmer and drier zone during El Nino, but there is an important caveat. While total seasonal snowfall tends to be below average, the region can still experience significant individual storm events. During the 1997-1998 El Nino, Minneapolis actually had several notable snowstorms, even though the overall season was warmer than normal. The bigger concern for the Twin Cities during El Nino is the freeze and thaw cycle. Above normal temperatures mean more frequent midwinter thaws, which can cause ice dam formation on roofs, water main breaks from ground heaving, and slippery conditions as melted snow refreezes. Homeowners in the Twin Cities should pay particular attention to their roofs this winter. Ice dams form when heat escaping from the attic melts snow on the roof, which then refreezes at the eaves. During El Nino winters with frequent temperature swings above and below freezing, ice dams can become severe enough to cause water damage inside the home. Make sure your attic insulation is adequate and that your roof is properly ventilated to minimize this risk. One more regional detail I want to cover before moving on. The Interstate 40 corridor from Oklahoma City through Little Rock to Memphis to Nashville. This stretch of highway sees some of the most dangerous winter driving conditions in the entire country during El Nino years. The combination of freezing rain, black ice, and rapid temperature changes makes this corridor treacherous. During the February 2011 ice storm, which occurred during a transition from La Nina to El Nino conditions, Interstate 40 was shut down in multiple locations due to ice accumulations exceeding 1 inch. Hundreds of accidents were reported and thousands of travelers were stranded. If you travel this corridor during the winter months, carry an emergency kit in your vehicle, including blankets, water, non-perishable food, a flashlight, and a fully charged phone charger. Let me also talk about water supply implications because this affects every single American. The western United States has been in a multi-decade water crisis. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the two largest reservoirs in the country which supply water to over 40 million people across 7 states, have been at historically low levels. A strong El Nino that delivers above-average precipitation to California, the Southwest, and the Colorado River watershed could provide meaningful relief. During the 2015-2016 El Nino, Lake Mead rose by about 12 feet from its low point, which bought the region additional time. If this El Nino delivers similar or greater precipitation, we could see another significant boost to these critical reservoirs. However, one wet winter does not solve a 20-plus year drought. The long-term water outlook for the West remains challenging regardless of what this El Nino brings. But every bit of additional water supply helps, and a strong El Nino year is exactly what the region needs right now. On the opposite end of the spectrum, above-average precipitation creates its own water challenges. Rivers and streams across the southern tier of the United States will run higher than normal during El Nino-enhanced winter rainfall. The Mississippi River, which drains about 40% of the continental United States, could see elevated water levels from late winter through spring as runoff from enhanced rainfall across the Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley, and Southern Plains all converges. Cities along the Mississippi and its major tributaries, including Memphis, St. Louis, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans, should monitor river levels closely and review flood preparedness plans. Chicago in depth. I mentioned Chicago earlier, but let me expand. The Windy City sits at a critical junction where multiple weather influences converge. Lake Michigan moderates temperatures, the flat terrain allows cold air to sweep in from Canada, and the city's location puts it in the path of numerous storm systems. During El Nino, Chicago tends to see its warmest winter temperatures, with the January average running about 35 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit compared to a normal of around 26 degrees. Snowfall totals tend to be below average at around 25 to 30 inches compared to the normal 36 inches. But the severe weather risk actually increases, particularly in spring. The enhanced jet stream combined with increasing warmth and moisture creates prime conditions for severe thunderstorms from March through May. Chicago should be alert for an active severe weather season following the El Nino winter. St. Louis and Kansas City in depth. These two Missouri cities are going to experience an interesting winter. Both tend to see above-average precipitation during El Nino, with St. Louis leaning wetter than Kansas City. The winter precipitation in these cities will lean more toward rain than snow, but when cold air does push through, the moisture available can produce significant ice storms. St. Louis sits near the freezing rain sweet spot during El Nino winters, and ice accumulations of a quarter-inch or more become more likely from December through February. Kansas City should expect a similar pattern with the added risk of enhanced severe weather in spring. Now let me bring up something that a lot of forecasters are watching closely but has not gotten enough media attention. The potential for this El Nino to interact with other climate signals in ways that could amplify its effects. Right now, the Atlantic Ocean is running warmer than normal as well. The North Atlantic is experiencing above-average sea surface temperatures across a wide area. When you combine a strong El Nino in the Pacific with warm Atlantic waters, the global atmospheric circulation pattern can become especially chaotic. This combination has been linked historically to some of the most extreme weather events on record. The Indian Ocean Dipole is another climate signal that meteorologists are monitoring. When the Indian Ocean Dipole aligns with El Nino in a certain way, it can amplify the already enhanced rainfall patterns across parts of the United States. Early indications suggest that the Indian Ocean Dipole may be moving into a positive phase, which would add fuel to the already potent El Nino setup. The Madden-Julian Oscillation, which is a pulse of enhanced thunderstorm activity that travels around the tropics on a roughly 30 to 60-day cycle, also interacts with El Nino in significant ways. During strong El Nino events, the Madden-Julian Oscillation tends to be more active, and its impacts on mid-latitude weather become more pronounced. This can lead to multi-week periods of persistent storminess followed by dry spells, creating the boom and bust pattern that characterizes El Nino weather. One more thing I want to address before wrapping up, and this is something that hits home for millions of Americans. The economic impact. Agriculture across the Great Plains, the Midwest, and California is going to be directly affected by this El Nino. For California farmers, the increased winter rainfall is generally positive because it replenishes reservoirs and groundwater. But heavy rains can also damage crops, particularly in the Central Valley, where lettuce, strawberries, and other produce are grown during the winter months. For ranchers across Texas and Oklahoma, the drought-busting rains from El Nino are desperately needed. Cattle producers have been dealing with poor pasture conditions and high feed costs due to drought. If the El Nino delivers the kind of rainfall the models are suggesting, it could provide significant relief for the agricultural economy of the Southern Plains. Energy costs are also affected. The warmer-than-normal winter temperatures across the northern two-thirds of the country during El Nino translate to lower heating demand, which can reduce natural gas and heating oil prices. However, increased storm activity can also cause power outages, and the economic cost of severe weather events, flooding, and snowstorms can offset any savings on heating bills. The ski industry and winter tourism economy in the Mountain West could see a boost from enhanced snowfall. But the Great Lakes region and New England ski areas may see reduced snow cover that hurts their season. It is a mixed bag depending on geography. Here is what I want you to take away from everything I have shared today. This developing El Nino is real, it is coming, and it is going to be significant. The science is solid, the models are in strong agreement, and the potential impacts span the entire country from coast to coast. Let me also address a few questions that I know are going to come up in the comments because I get these every time we discuss El Nino. First, is El Nino caused by climate change? The short answer is no. El Nino is a natural climate pattern that has been occurring for thousands of years. It is driven by the interaction between the ocean and the atmosphere in the tropical Pacific. However, climate scientists have noted that El Nino events may be intensifying in a warming world because the baseline ocean temperatures are higher, meaning the additional warming from El Nino gets added on top of already elevated temperatures. Think of it as the floor being raised. El Nino still causes the same relative spike in temperatures, but because the starting point is higher, the peak temperatures reached are also higher. Second, can the forecast change? Absolutely. Long-range forecasting always carries uncertainty. While the probability of a strong El Nino developing is very high based on current data, the exact intensity and timing could shift as we get closer. The subsurface ocean warmth is a very strong signal that gives forecasters confidence. But atmospheric coupling, meaning how quickly the atmosphere responds to the ocean warming, can vary. I will be updating you regularly as new data comes in. Third, how does El Nino affect my allergies? This is a question that a lot of people do not think to ask, but it matters. Warmer and wetter winters in the southern tier of the country can lead to earlier and more intense allergy seasons in the spring. The enhanced rainfall promotes plant growth, and when spring arrives, all that extra vegetation produces more pollen. If you suffer from seasonal allergies in states like Texas, the Southeast, or California, the spring following a strong El Nino winter could be particularly challenging. Talk to your doctor about your allergy management plan now rather than waiting until you are already suffering. Fourth, what about my garden and landscaping? Gardeners across the country will need to adjust their plans based on El Nino impacts. In the wetter regions, plan for saturated soil conditions that can promote root rot and fungal diseases. In the warmer regions of the Midwest and Northeast, the earlier arrival of spring-like temperatures can trick perennial plants into breaking dormancy early, making them vulnerable to late freezes. California gardeners should plan for erosion control and drainage management during the wet winter months. Fifth, how does this affect pet safety? I bring this up because our furry family members are affected by extreme weather too. During severe weather events, make sure your pets have identification tags and are microchipped. Keep them indoors during storms. If you have outdoor animals, make sure they have adequate shelter from wind, rain, and cold. During flood events, never leave pets behind. Include them in your evacuation plans and have carriers ready. Now let me tell you about something that very few people are talking about but could be one of the most significant aspects of this El Nino. The feedback loop. When a strong El Nino occurs, it releases enormous amounts of heat from the Pacific Ocean into the atmosphere. This heat does not just disappear after the El Nino ends. It gets redistributed around the globe, and it can take months or even years for the climate system to fully adjust. After the 1997-1998 El Nino, global temperatures remained elevated for over a year after the event ended. After the 2015-2016 El Nino, 2016 went on to set the record for the warmest year ever recorded at that time. If this developing El Nino reaches the intensity the models are suggesting, 2027 could challenge whatever temperature records are set in 2026. The ripple effects of a strong El Nino extend far beyond the event itself, and there is one final twist that I want to leave you with. After every strong El Nino, there is a significant probability of a strong La Nina developing in its wake. La Nina is the opposite phase, characterized by cooler than normal waters in the equatorial Pacific, and La Nina has its own set of impacts that are essentially the mirror image of El Nino: more active Atlantic hurricane seasons, drier conditions across the southern tier of the country, colder winters in the northern states. So what we may be looking at is not just one extreme event, but a dramatic swing from one extreme to the other, from a potentially historic El Nino in 2026 into 2027 to a potentially strong La Nina in 2027 into 2028. That kind of whiplash between extremes is when the most dramatic weather events tend to occur. Your job is not to panic. Your job is to prepare. Knowledge is your best weapon against extreme weather, and by watching this video, you are already ahead of the curve. Share this information with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, anyone who needs to hear it. Post it on your social media. Send the link to your group chats. The more people who are informed and prepared, the safer we all are when these storms arrive. And one more thing. I know a lot of you are parents and grandparents watching this. Talk to your kids and grandkids about weather preparedness. Make it a family project. Put together your emergency kit together as a household. Walk through your shelter plan together. Kids who understand what to do during severe weather are calmer and safer when the real thing happens. It is never too early to start building weather awareness in the next generation. I am going to be providing continuous updates as this El Nino develops. Each new data release from the Climate Prediction Center and the European models will be analyzed and broken down for you in plain language with practical information you can use. Do not miss that next video because I'm going to reveal which 3 cities in America are projected to see the most extreme weather swings during this El Nino. And one of them is going to surprise you. I will also be diving into the winter of 26 and 27 forecast, which the models are already showing could be one for the history books. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you do not miss it. Comment your city and state below, and I will prioritize your area in the next